In his short story, The House of Asterion, Georges Borges takes the reader into the depths of the labyrinth built by Daedalus to meet our narrator, the minotaur, Asterion. Asterion rests in the silent darkness of solitude and peace willingly. He's no prisoner, though he chooses to remain in the labyrinth. Quote, "It is true that I never leave my house, but it is also true that its doors, whose number is infinite, are open day and night to men and to animals as well. Anyone may enter. He will find here no female pomp or gallant court formality, but he will find quiet and solitude." Asterion is a philosophical creature. He cares not for what men say to one another, but he's also illiterate to his own sadness. He's never had the patience of learning. He charges through the hallways and hides in the shadows, pretending he is being chased. He oftentimes imagines another Asterion visiting him, one to whom he can show off his home. The Minotaur is very much alone, and the only thing to break the monotony of his existence, the only things distinguishing one room from the other, are the bodies of the men who die within the walls of the labyrinth. Yet he waits alone, wondering who his redeemer will be. Borges' first-person narrative of the Minotaur exposes the binary we often forget when we read Greek mythology. There's no monster without a hero. Asterion never knows he is a monster, and we are not set up to believe he is. The story opens with the quote from Apollodorus' Bibliotheca, quote, "And the queen gave birth to a child who was called Asterion." Those familiar with the myth know from the opening quote that the story is about the Minotaur, but for those unfamiliar, Asterion is a son, first and foremost, and a prince no less. His introduction echoes the opening of familiar fairy tales like Sleeping Beauty, Little Briar Rose, whose tale opens with the following quote, "In times past there lived a king and queen who said to each other every day of their lives, 'Would that we had a child,' and yet they had none. But it happened once that when the queen was bathing, there came a frog out of the water, and he squatted on the ground and said to her, 'Thy wish shall be fulfilled. Before a year has gone by, thou shalt bring a daughter to the world.' And as the frog foretold, so it happened, and the queen bore a daughter so beautiful that the king could not contain himself for joy, and he ordained a great feast." Stories told to us from childhood have taught us that the default emotions a reader should feel at the birth of a royal child is excitement, joy and happiness and hope. The tale should be a happy one. Royal children are always wanted, they are prayed for, though they're often subjected to the deeds of wicked and jealous witches and monsters until they are saved, until they are redeemed. We don't question the locked-away nature of damsels such as Rapunzel, who, like Asterion, are isolated within stone walls, though she is locked away where he is not. Still, we're taught the formulation of a fairy tale. Rapunzel exists for the reader to see her saved, for her to be redeemed. Asterion is set up in the same way, which is not only familiar but relatable. We're not afraid of this royal child, and we understand his feelings. The feelings of playing make-believe and the feelings of rejection and isolation. Asterion tells the reader of a time when he left the labyrinth, but he returned quickly, quote, "because of the fear that the faces of the common people inspired in me. The hapless crying of child and the rude supplications of the faithful told me that I had been recognised. The people prayed, fled, and prostrated themselves." You see, Asterion knows that there's a difference between him and the others, but it's not his monstrosity. He believes it's his royalty, his otherworldly powers. In the same way, they are just mere mortals rather than gods. Despite his isolation, Asterion thinks kind of highly of himself. He acknowledges that he is unique, opening his narrative saying, quote, "I know they accuse me of arrogance and perhaps misanthropy, and perhaps madness. Who are they? How has he come to know of these things as a creature who, self-admittedly, never leaves his home or interacts with other people? How has he come to conceptualise his selfhood? He cannot perceive his monstrosity, though technically, nor can we, the readers, in the absence of a hero. His sense of reality is as grounded as ours would be were we to read a story without intertextual knowledge of the original myth. This empathetic abjection of Asterion, Susie Waltman explains, relies on a Lacanian understanding of the real. Susie Waltman explains that for Lacan, the subject is constructed through language and its imaginary and symbolic boundaries. The Lacanian model breaks down the world into three subsects: the imaginary, the real, and the symbolic. Myth is thus hard to categorise. Mythology is a methodology for talking about language. It's what Roland Barthes calls meta-language, a second language used to speak about the first. Those of us familiar with the myth of the Minotaur recognise this adaptation has been removed from its understood context, and the repositioning of the perspective challenges the symbolic order for the myth's very existence. It's no longer a sacred tale about a hero, it's a tale about Asterion. When we're reading it from his perspective, the self and the other have been forced by the writer to swap places, because we, the reader, are now the monster. But before I go any further, I'd like to take a moment to thank today's sponsor, which is Squarespace. Squarespace is an all-in-one website platform empowering individuals to create their online web presence or launch their passion projects, combining 2 decades of industry-led design expertise with cutting-edge AI technology to unlock your strongest creative potential. Squarespace's design intelligence empowers anyone to build a beautiful website tailored to their unique needs and craft a bespoke digital identity to use across one's entire online presence. I recently redesigned my website to focus more on my newsletter and also my writing projects. I can do it all with Squarespace. I can sell my PDF files on there because Squarespace offers a one-platform solution for your running your business. So I can receive payments for my PDF files, and anything that you sell online, you can get donations as well from people who just like your content, and customers can pay with popular payment methods like Klarna, Apple Pay, Afterpay and ClearPay. Squarespace also has activity scheduling facilities which allows my customers to book with me if they want an appointment for, coaching or signing up for a writing workshop and things like that. Same if you're a coach or brick and mortar business. And I engage with my customers all online through my email set campaigns, which are super simple to set up on Squarespace. So it has templates and you can just collect your customers on there, all sorted. So if you want to expand your business or just build a beautiful website for your blogging leisure, go to squarespace.com for a free trial. And then when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/lady of the library to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. It's very hard for us as readers to truly appreciate the full scale of this because we can never undo what we already know. The symbolic order of self in relation to the myths is so ingrained in society that we will always label a monster in relation to a hero, and we will naturally identify with the latter more frequently than the former. Additionally, even without mythology, the symbolic order of the other and the self is even more ingrained in our societies. It is the symbolic norm of global societies to fear that which looks and is different from us. Thus, when we are reading about people running away from Asterion, that reflects a response that we're more familiar with. We see regularly how societies treat and fear those who are different. For many readers, Asterion will feel closer to them than ever. There is no monster without a hero. There is no other without a conceptualized norm. There is no other without a self, and yet we in the story, due to a first-person narrative, are Asterion. He is the other as self. Asterion does not see the ritual slaughter of 9 men every 9 years as a punishment. He believes it's a ritual, one in which he relinquishes them from evil, and we see this religiosity in his employment of the word prophesized. One of the men he kills prophesized Asterion's death, when a, quote, redeemer would come. Like many religious figures, the thought of a redeemer comforts Asterion. The redeemer will come and lift him from his loneliness and the monotonous existence within the labyrinth by giving him the same ritualistic treatment he has given others. There's a religious beauty in the thought of him being subjected to the same ritual he so joyfully blesses other men with, their deaths. When thinking of the monster in literature, we often turn to texts such as Frankenstein and Kafka's Metamorphoses. But in these texts, both monsters are acutely aware of their monstrosity. As Daniel Cotton puts it, Frankenstein is an example of monstrosity being the foundation of the monster's creation. Quote, in seeking to represent himself, man makes himself a monster. Or, to put it in other words, Frankenstein's monster images the monstrous nature of representation. Frankenstein's monster is unaware he is a monster until he sees his own reflection. Quote, I had admired the perfect forms of my cottagers, their grace, beauty, and delicate complexions, and how was I terrified when I viewed myself in a transparent pool. At first I started back, unable to believe that was indeed who I was reflected in the mirror. And when I became fully convinced that I was in reality the monster that I am, I was filled with the bitterest sensations of despondence and mortification. Alas, I did not yet entirely know the fatal effects of this miserable deformity. Note how this is very different from Asterion. Asterion is aware of his otherness. He's aware he is half man, half bull, yet he even dreams of meeting another Asterion. He doesn't think he's alone. He knows he is other from those people, but they are other to him. He does not correlate their response to his appearance as a status of monstrosity, but one of royalty. The idea that Frankenstein's monster sees himself as monstrous and ugly comes again from a preset nature of the writer's understanding of self and other. It is presupposed Frankenstein's monster would understand himself as other, himself as horrifying. But would he really? Asterion doesn't see himself as monstrous. He just knows they are other. Humans instinctively, even as children, respond in shock to that which is slightly different from them. But would a child, upon seeing their reflection for the first time, understand themselves as ugly, as horrifying? Or does that come from a learned response? Does that come from the messages of what monstrosity is, of the messages that we are told of what is hideous and what is unwanted? We see two different reactions from Asterion and Frankenstein's monster upon being rejected and feared. So is self-hatred, as demonstrated by Frankenstein's monster, innate or created? And where did it come from for him? Kafka's metamorphoses is very different from these two. Gregor Samsa, the protagonist of the novella, is an adult man when he wakes up to find himself a monstrous vermin. The idea of monstrosity and otherness was already established in his life by society. He was not born this way, and unlike Frankenstein's monster and Asterion, he does not live in isolation. The conceptualization of monstrosity or disgust and ugliness is cemented in him by societal understandings. What's more interesting is that we, as the reader, know less about how he looks than we do in the monsters of Frankenstein's monster and Asterion. Gregor is possibly a cockroach, though he could also be a bedbug, depending on the descriptions. Yet the more Gregor is rejected from the world, the more he retreats into his bedroom, where he cannot disgust anyone. At the same time, Gregor and the reader come to feel disgusted with his former existence, one in which he lived senselessly from day to day, charging through unrelenting monotony for very little other than survival, and to line the pockets of a huge, faceless corporation. Gregor is othered for his appearance. His bedroom becomes an additional storage space for his family, who continue to ignore and neglect him until, spoilers for the ending if you haven't read it, but Gregor starves himself to death. Upon finding his dead body in his bedroom and giving it a shove, Mr. Samsa only has one thing left to say. Let's give thanks to God for that. Gregor's death symbolises another less mouth to feed, another less monstrous, unemployed and unemployable creature to think about. It makes life easier when they're no longer around. One doesn't have to feel guilt or be bothered with the concern that they should be more caring than they actually are for it. Each of these texts, though very different, serve to remind the reader of what kind of monster they truly are, how they reject and dismiss the other, care little for the health and survival of those whose homes and lands they obliterate and strip away all the human rights of, and access to resources that are essential for life. We live in a society where humans let those who they no longer want to exist starve and suffer to death by denying them their humanity and resources. But all in the name of being greater humans and getting rid of the monsters. The more worthwhile humans are the richer ones and exist according to the standards of beauty and worthiness that they established for themselves, as these books show. There is only a monster when someone writes themselves in as the hero. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing, and following this channel, following my podcast, The Annotated Mind, and also my Substack, The Annotated Mind, and my second channel. All are listed in the description box down below. Thank you as always to my Patreons for supporting me and making this all possible, and I will see you soon for another video. Remember, be happy and healthy, and books save lives, so keep reading.